Hey guys, welcome to the World War I exhibit. This is going to be about the trench, so that hopefully by the end of this you guys can actually be able to take tours through here on a pretty good basis. Alright, so the first thing you need to know about trench warfare in general was the only reason it even happened was because most of the modern weaponry at the time had actually become so horrific and so deadly that men needed to find shelter from those weapons. So they started to dig down into the earth so that they wouldn't be shot out in the open like in previous wars past. Most of the guns had become so accurate that they could kill you up to 300 yards away with ease. So that's the whole reason trench warfare actually began. Now at the start of the war, the Germans were actually the ones that developed their trenches much more complete and much better than the Allies. The Allies always believed that they were going to be on the attack. And so they always believed that they were going to take the German trenches. Now, this trench would resemble more of a German trench itself. Now, the reason is because it's actually nice and clean. The Germans actually were more willing to retreat to the high ground so that they could just pump water down into the Allied lines. The water table in France and especially in Belgium was actually only a few feet down. So as you go through the trench, there's actually a few pictures in here that actually show men literally with water up in mud up to their knees. So, other things about this trench that you might want to consider is also talk about the horrid conditions, such as that water table. You may also want to talk about some of the rat problems that they had. They also had a lot of disease. Men would be very, very close together. So that close proximity led to a lot of men getting sick. As for the rat problem, turns out rats love to eat a lot of the things soldiers leave behind, such as canned goods, such as any food left over, or just the dead and dying. So, later on in the exhibit, you'll actually have labels that explain the rat problem a little bit better, but the rats could get up to about the size of a house cat, and they would actually devour dead soldiers in no man's land and in the trenches. Now, this trench is actually designed as what you would see along the way. So over here you have the quartermaster's area, where he would have been giving you any of your necessary clothing, such as fresh socks, things like that. And as you move along through the trench, you'll get into here where it's more of a communications area, where there's a guy on guard right here, and the other two are trying to work out everything that's going on the battlefield. Now a trench is actually designed in layers, so it wouldn't just be one line of trench and everyone's in it. You would have the firing line, the reserve line behind that, and then the communications line after that. So it would be a set of three usually, with a lot of smaller trenches leading in between them. So it'd be a lot more like veins in an artery. So when you're doing this, now most trenches would be about 6 to 7 feet deep. Some of them went even deeper, depending on where they were on the terrain. One of the horrifying things about trench warfare was actually the fact that it was really, really boring. In fact, during most of the day, you'd just be sitting around in the trench waiting for something to happen. And a lot of cases, men would get kind of complacent, poke their heads up over the top to try and see what was going on out in no man's land and actually get shot. So it was very, very dangerous. You had to stay on your toes, even though it was very boring most of the day. So you would start your day with a stand to session where at dawn they would have you stand at the ready with your guns ready in case of an attack. After that you'd eat breakfast and you would basically go on guard duty. Some of you might have to patrol the trench, make sure everything's safe. Throughout the whole day you're pretty much just sitting there until dusk, where you have another stand to session. And then during the night was actually one of the scariest, because that's when a lot of raids happen. So a lot of men would sneak over into no man's land in the dark and lay barbed wire. Sometimes they would even attack the other trenches by throwing grenades in and then running back to their side. So actually, night was probably the scariest time in the trench. Okay. Now that pretty much covers most of this trench area. Some of the other guns and stuff in here, these are all pretty much just dioramas. So it's more for people to just see kind of what a trench would look like. Now, a few questions that you may want to, that you're going to need to answer so that you kind of get an idea. Why would they even go down into the trenches in the first place? What drove them into digging trenches? The second question would be, how many lines of a trench would there be, and would they all be connected? And the third one would be, kind of how would a day in the trench go? Like, how would you start it and how would you end it? Okay, and hopefully if you can answer those, you can get through this trench area with a tour pretty safely. All right, after you can answer those 3 questions, you can send that to education@worldtreasures.org with the subject line World War I Trench.